Hello everybody and welcome to the Kube Vanguard CKA study series. Okay, this is a series where we're going to go through and talk about some of the concepts of the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam. Simply because I have to redo the exam in July, which is coming up very soon. I mean, I don't have to do it in July, but I lose my certification because it's been 3 years. So I decided to do this series to act as a study guide for myself, but also to help everybody else out. Okay. And today we're going to talk about services. First, I want to have my rant. I always have my rant to keep things interesting. One thing in the IT community, which is never really discussed, it's kind of a taboo subject, is the whole after-hours work thing, okay? And it kind of seems that it's taken for granted that when you sign up for a job, you're on call, you're after hours, and all this stuff. It's idiotic and it's moronic, is all I can say. And it actually hurts the companies themselves very badly, but they're too silly to understand it. Human beings need rest, and human beings do not function well when they're being hounded, okay? So what happens is if you're on call too much, or your on call is too heavy, you work your 8 hours during the day, which is really the most amount you can work as a human being well, okay? I don't care what these companies say. Human beings, it's like marathon runs. You can only do so much, and then you continue to work, but you do it badly. You make mistakes, okay? Your efficiency goes down. But the on-call is especially vicious because your phone sits there, and you watch it, and you wonder when it's going to ring with some disaster or something. This is like the water torture technique. And if you don't know that technique, I'll tell you, just don't use it on anybody. It's when you're forced to sit there, and they drop water on your head. I think they shave your head first, but they do it at different intervals, okay? So it's not like tick, 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 and then somehow you get used to it, and I don't know, you think it's out something. No, different intervals, so you never know when that water drop is coming, and it basically drives you insane. Well, on call is the same thing, basically. So the combination of working the 8 hours, if you're working well. Now, if you're goofing off for 8 hours, I have no sympathy for you. But if you're honestly working hard for 8 hours, and that's really what you should be doing, once in a while, obviously you have to do more. That's understandable, projects, whatnot. But then if you're also taking that kind of an on-call situation on for yourself, where you never know when the call is coming, and it could be in the middle of something really important, family stuff, whatever, that is disastrous. You will not last very long unless you have no feelings and you're a robot, which very few of us are. So that's my warning to you. As for companies, I don't buy it. I don't buy the, well, we're really stuck for profits. I don't buy it. I see CEO salaries, they're enormous, okay? This is all a load of BS. What is BS? Bologna sausage. So I know, I've heard that, what's that guy's name? Muskrat, whatever, that he sleeps on the factory floor. That's baloney, okay? I've seen photos of him in like first class, like Emirates, sitting there with a bed. So don't buy it, okay? Don't buy it. And the only way to avoid that is to be honest. Be honest with companies. Say, look, no, I'm an excellent worker. I'll work really hard and I'll bring a lot of value to the company if I'm given the right conditions. And to be fair to CEOs and managers, good ones will understand that and they'll work out a system that will work. Obviously, there has to be coverage. Customers must be supported. But a system will be worked out which protects the company, protects the employees, and protects the customers. Okay? There you go. That's my take on it. My rant for the week. Let's get back to business. So I took my glasses off because I'm having trouble with this light shine situation. You know what? If I don't have glasses, there's no reflection on my glasses. So I'm talking like this. Everything's very fuzzy, but that's okay. I was used to that after my years of university Friday nights. All right. So we're back to today, and I'm going to put my glasses on, and we will switch screens and talk about services in Kubernetes. Okay, there's my big screen. It's very nice. Let's go to services. So as always, we are going to go to the Kubernetes documentation because that's where you will find all the deep definition. Now, what is a service? And I'll explain that quickly. There are pods, and pods have IP addresses in Kubernetes. And each pod can have more than one container in there, and that'll still have one IP address, and then all those pods, containers, could be contacted on that basis, okay? So keep that in mind. So the question is, well, why not just have pods and IP addresses and treat them like VMs, right? Doesn't that make sense? Well, because there's a difference. Because pods can possibly not live forever, okay? They can be replaced. They can be up 1 second, down the next second. You might want to do a rolling upgrade where certain pods are coming down and other pods are coming up taking their place. So if you're using static IPs or IPs of the pods, you get new IPs every time a new pod is created. That would kill the whole self-heal idea in Kubernetes and other benefits. So what they decided to do is create an abstraction. So you have your pods, and they have their IP addresses, but you know those pods could be replaced, or they might be upgraded, they might change. Basically, those IP addresses on those pods will change because the pods will change. So what do you do if you want continuous service? You create an abstract or a component or object, whatever you want to call it, called a service. That always has the IP address that it's got, okay, or it's what it's representing. So if you go to that service, doesn't matter what pods are behind it, it will forward on the traffic to the pods. Okay, so the pods can be changing IP addresses, and it will load balance and send it to the pods. Or if you've got one pod, it'll send to there. That's the basic idea. So this is all described here in the documentation about services. Now, as far as I understand it still, you only really have to understand 3 types of services for the Kubernetes exam, the CKA. You might want to check that, okay, because things change all the time, because there are a few, but the 3 very important ones. Now, a very important thing to remember is that Kubernetes by default, the services, cannot be contacted from outside of the cluster. Okay, very important. So when you create a Kubernetes cluster, it's like a little bottle, or I don't know what you call it, a little incubator, or a, what do they have, the fish in a fish bowl, fish tank, right? And all the services and pods can talk to one of each other in there. But from outside, by default, you can't. And why is that? Because by default, services get what they call a cluster IP. So it's an IP only for the cluster. Okay? So keep that in mind. And that is one of the 3 types, I think it's still 3 types, double check, that you need to understand for the Kubernetes exam. Then there's something called a node port. Okay? A node port. Again, the name basically describes what it is. It's going to take a port on one of the nodes and advertise that outside of the cluster, okay? So if I have even a single node cluster, okay, and it's got an IP address of, I don't know, 192.168.1.2, I can create a node port, okay, service, and then node port starts on like 30,000 and upwards, goes to 30,000 something, whatever, because they didn't want to interfere with any other known ports. And you then would be able to go to that IP address from your browser or from wherever, and if it's, and on your network, and go to that service, okay? The problem with that is it takes up a port on the node itself, okay? Now, if you have 5 nodes, it'll still advertise it. You'll still get to it because it'll advertise it through all the nodes, but it's not the most efficient, and it's not really supposed to be used in production. So in production, there are different things you can do. But one of the things that you do, especially in the cloud, is you use a load balancer service, okay? What a load balancer service does is it's an installed component in Kubernetes, and it will assign an external IP to your service, okay? So when you create a load balancer service, or if you're on Google Cloud or Azure, they've done it automatically. The minute you type that your service is going to be load balancer, the cluster will go out, reach out, and grab one of those IPs, external IPs, and it'll appear that way, okay? Now, what if you have on-prem? Well, on-prem, you can use something like Metal LB, which is a do-it-yourself load balancer. Main thing is you configure a pool of IPs that are free, and then you can advertise them, okay? Now, you can also contact your services, your HTTP and HTTPS service, through ingress, okay? And then there's traffic. It gets more complicated. We might want to not go that far because for the exam you don't need it. But ingress is when, for instance, you want to have, let's say, numerous endpoints, I guess, HTTP endpoints on the same IP on the same port. Okay, so let's say I've got, Jeff's store, and then you've got the dash shoes department, the dash, I don't know, something else department, whatever. Well, you can put that in ingress. And if you type dash shoes, it'll go to one service. If you go to Jeff's beer store, it'll go to a different service. There is ingress on the exam as well. We'll talk about ingress next week. Right now, we're talking about the services. So if you go to the documentation, you will see here, define a service. The main ones you want to look at, again, are cluster IP, load balancer, and node port. So you can see here, those 3. External name is when you just create a a DNS for the service and there's no IP address and it works that way, again, I don't think that's on the CKA exam. We'll have to double check that. These for certain are cluster IP, no port, load balancer, okay? So let me just show you very quickly here, because we're kind of pressed for time. I have a small Rancher desktop again on my laptop, and let's just go into my cluster and let's get, for instance, namespaces. See what I've installed? Okay, got a bunch of namespaces. So let's go to the Nginx namespace. Okay, so and let's see if there's a service in there. So let's do K, which is kubectl, but I've created aliases. K get SVC. Remember, for the exam, you don't want to type out service. Save some time. There's a shortened form, SVC. And let's see in the namespace itself. So Nginx, there I did the autocomplete. Oh, no services. No services there. That was a bad example. I could create a service, but there's none in there. So let's see where there is one. But that's how you find a service. Let's look at Kasten. Kasten definitely is a service because I was playing with it the other day. It actually has a bunch of services. Look at this. Isn't this fun? So in this case, all these components of Kasten are being advertised. And as you can see, they all have services. All right. Now, what you'll see is they're all cluster IPs, okay? So these are all internal services, all right? Internal. There's no external IP. So Jeff, how do you get to it? Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I'm using Ingress for this, okay? This is a K3S in Rancher Desktop, so it comes with a load balancer called Clipper. Clipper. It's not the greatest one. It's fine for single node clusters, okay? But what I did was I created an ingress, and you have to have a load balancer. The ingress then leverages that load balancer to expose itself. So let's just see what I did here. Let's get K, get ing, right? I don't want to type ingress. You know how many typos I would have? In Kasten. Now let's just see that ingress. Okay, there it is. And look, it's got that address there. This is Rancher Desktop again, the way it's being exposed, but that's the ingress. Okay, so now what I could have done is I could have created a load balancer service. If this was Google Cloud or Azure, or if I had MetalLB installed, I could have created a load balancer for the actual service, which is I think it's the gateway service. Gateway is the one that shows the GUI in Kasten, okay? But they're all cluster IP, okay? Or I could do node port. In fact, why don't we have some fun and do that? Let's edit. So we're going to do K edit service SVC in Kasten, okay? And it will be gateway. We're going to edit that. Okay, we're going to go to type. I'm going to type, there it is, cluster IP. And let's create node port. So let's make it a node port. So capital node and then capital PRT port. And I'll let it just get its own, okay? So now, if we go to service to get service in Kasten, what are we going to see? We're going to see that that is a node port service, okay? See, node port. And if you look closely, you will see port 3522 is the port, okay? So let's copy that, 3522. So what's my IP address of the Rancher Desktop? I think this should work on my local, although sometimes it doesn't. Let's just try 127001, and then what was it, 30? I already forgot. Let's take a look. It was 3522. Can't be found. I think I know why. 1 second. So it also could be because this is Rancher Desktop. So that's the problem with many distributions. They have their own way of kind of displaying stuff, okay? So that's probably not going to work because this is also Windows subsystem for Linux, okay? So I think I have to do an extra command. How am I doing for time? I am doing, oh my goodness, I've got 1 minute left. Okay, you have to trust me on this. I've got less than a minute. Basically, what you need to do, if this was a normal cluster, I would be able to do that. It would work perfectly. Here, it's Windows subsystem for Linux. I really should get that WSL $, whatever, and it would work, but I've got to find out the IP for it. So I don't have time this week. Next week, we will look at that, okay? So I promise, I'm going to write the note down. I promise next week to come back to that and show you that. And we will continue services because we didn't get to talk about it much. See you next week.